Well, I am excited, and actually, in a lot of ways, this has been somewhat of a long time coming to bring good friend and former colleague Kurt Bascom onto the show as the next interview guest. And Kurt, before we go any further, if you could just introduce yourself to the listeners.
Hi, my name's Kurt Bascom. I'm a teacher in the Bronx. I teach seventh and eighth grade social studies. I'm also a football coach. I coach at Columbus High School, which is actually a collection of four different schools. And I'm a dad of two kids. My son Dallas is 13 and in the eighth grade. My daughter Kylie is 11 and going into the sixth grade. And I live up in Dutchess County, but anyone ever asks me, I'm from the Bronx.
There you go. And, in full transparency, Kurt and I were colleagues at. Actually, we were both essentially founding members of the eighth grade team at the school where Kurt still works, and that was fun. It really was. That was probably one of the best teams that I've been part of in my career. Although I will admit that I've been probably out of the classroom more than I've been in at this point. But I had a lot of fun. And granted, I was only there for about a year and a half before I jumped ship to be a little closer to home after I moved to Connecticut. But it was great, man, and I'm glad to see you're still at that school. And listen, I know that times are weird to say the least right now, and New York City schools, including the school where you're at in the Bronx, are still remote and teaching remotely. But if I can say it, I think one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about was the work that you've been doing even since March when we all went to remote learning or distance learning, whatever you call it, to
Mm.
make sure that you're maintaining connections and communication with your students and their families and really lots of different stakeholders at your school. Can you talk about that a little bit? I know that you've jumped on to Instagram Live and YouTube Live, and it's been really cool. I've seen what you're doing. So yeah, talk about that.
I The number one thing to me has always been about the kids. It's always been about connecting with them and making my lessons memorable and making their time in my class memorable. Be going not just to engaging, but where they're going to reflect on this and feel positive about it and like social studies. So, actually, the first time I started tinkering with going on live or going online, I tore my meniscus in my knee about 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, and I knew I had to be home to rehab it a little bit. And I started tinkering with the idea of trying to kind of live stream into my classroom from home. And I really didn't know how to do it. I spoke to the IT person at our school and we messed around with it a little bit and they were able to see me, but we couldn't quite communicate. And then I kept tinkering and tinkering. And then I got to creating my own YouTube channel. And this was back in December and just for fun. No one asked me to do it or anything like that. I just wanted to see if I could and reach out to not just my current students but my former students. And with YouTube I was able to um, basically riff and talk about things that were on my mind. I'd bring my daughter on from time to time, but essentially it was I could they could communicate with me via chat. So I could answer their questions and kind of talk about different topics that they wanted to bring up, and they that really reassured them. And for me, I felt really proud that I had a new way to connect with them. And then unfortunately, when COVID and the pandemic struck, it was I felt like a little bit ahead of the game because I'd been doing it already.
Yeah, and one of the things too that I don't want to forget about, and I'd like to highlight about you and your work is that over the years that I've known you, I know that it is not just connecting with your students virtually, which you've done really well, but I think you do even better job at connecting and building those relationships with students in person, whether it's the students who are in front of you in your classroom or the students that you coach football wise. So I guess I was just wondering if you might be able to talk about that a little bit too. Student engagement, but even more so, just like getting students to feel like they're a part of something, a part of a family, dare I say. I think you're one of those guys that throughout my career has done it the best. So,
Thanks. I don't know. I when I started teaching, I had coached football first. When I was a kid, I got hurt and my parents split up in some things, so I really couldn't play football anymore. But I started coaching my younger brother when I was 15, and then I did that into college. And when I finished college, I was a history major, and I love telling stories and things like that. And My experiences with football, though, is kind of what got my foot in the door as far as teaching. And it was really when you're coaching a sport, particularly football, it's a close game, it's a team game. There's a lot of life lessons embedded in the game itself. So it really just lent really easily for me to doing well in the classroom and really connecting, like that huddle feel, like there was just us versus them sort of a thing, and it really carried over. And um, it's something I take a lot of pride in. I just a few days ago, I had a student of mine share some pictures with me from 24 years ago. He was in my class and remembered things very well. And then I have another student of mine from 4 years ago who was applying to West Point, among other things, and he had asked me for a letter of recommendation. And I wrote him back. Of course, I'd help him in things. And I asked him, I said, why? Why me? It's been 4 years. And he said, well, the last time we spoke in person, you really kind of spoke to me about the changes you saw in myself, and it really changed my perspective on myself, in seeing the growth and valuing the growth in myself. And that's what keeps me going all these years. In February, it'll be 27 years, and I just feel like these kids keep me going. A lot of people don't go as long as I go, or they become very jaded. And really, I get this fire from the kids, and it's just about wanting to keep them going, and then them expressing their appreciation. That's everything.
That's awesome, man. And I can tell obviously there's some emotion there. I know it means a lot to you. One of the things that you just said, I think, is pretty key, that you get that fire, that passion from the kids. Like, you feed off of their energy. And I know that one of the things that keeps your students engaged in the classroom is, like you said a couple minutes ago, kind of that storytelling aspect. And actually, I think I mentioned to you that a few episodes back in this podcast, I did shout your name out, and it sort of hit the cutting room floor, if you will, on the actual audio side when I put out the episode. But it did make it into the YouTube video, and I was speaking to a present colleague of mine, Mark Jackson, who is also a social studies teacher at the middle school level. And you guys remind me a lot of each other, because that aspect of what you do is so apparent in terms of making sure that you are getting the message through to your students in clever, creative, fun, engaging ways. I told the story, and again, it hit the cutting room floor, so I'm going to tell it again now, make sure it gets in here. I will never forget the time where you had the school safety agents at our school, when I was still working there, arrest you to make a point and to really hammer home whatever lesson. I don't even know what the lesson was, but I still remember it because of that. And I'm sure the students who were in your classroom then, and if you've done it since, remember that as well. So, like, what kind of tricks do you have up your sleeve? Like, how do you do that? Can you even explain it?
No, not really, but it's sort of. I want to be entertained. I think about what would grab me, and I remember when I was growing up, I found most of my social studies teachers really boring, to be honest. But my dad was a fantastic storyteller, still is, and I kind of really enjoyed that idea of grabbing the audience with the way you tell a story, not with fireworks and special effects and all of that. And for that lesson in particular, we were learning about the Fourth and Fifth Amendments in the Constitution with seventh grade, and I was trying to think of a way, how can they really see this? And I'm always trying to find different graphics and pictures and video and things. And it's like, wait a minute, what if I got arrested? And I spoke with my principal, Miss Gilligan, and some of the other staff about, all right, this is what we'll do. I'll take your phone. I'll have it in my pocket, and then the agent will come in, and we worked it all out, and everyone went along with it, and the kids didn't realize what was happening because the assistant principal that was in the room, he was recording with an iPad, and the kids just thought it was an observation, because sometimes admins do that. So they really weren't any the wiser, and it really carried over. Those kids talked about that for a long, long time. I haven't done it in a long time because word got out. I don't want to blow up the spot and make it less than it actually was, but it was really effective.
Yeah,
It
that's
was a lot.
cool. And I remember, I was trying to think when we worked together. I was somewhere around my seventh and eighth year in my career. But I think those were some times where between myself and you as a social studies teacher, and also myself and the science teacher, who I believe is still at the school as well,
Yeah.
some of my first memories in terms of like true interdisciplinary stuff, and I don't know whether that was because I felt like it was a really strong team, or whether we individually and collectively as a team felt like we were ready for some of that stuff, and that meant a lot to me, and it's stuck with me as I've coached teachers, especially to be like, look, you don't have to be just stuck inside your little bubble of your classroom, but use your teammates and find out what they're doing and help
Mm.
plan together so that you can, run thematic units or just make it. I think make it easier on you and even your students if you just help each other out a little bit.
Yeah, I'd like to see that more sometimes, to be
Mhm.
honest. I do feel sometimes, teachers sometimes feel kind of, lassoed or anchored by the curriculum they're mandated to teach. So it can be difficult to get cross curricular sometimes. I think the years we were together, and class of 2013 into 2014, um, I always looked at it like we were kind of handpicked, sort of like an all-star team in a way. It was really kind of cool. We came from different areas, and we had very unique approaches, all of us, and they kind of left us alone a little bit. They hadn't really dealt with older kids in that way, maybe, and we had a certain amount of free reign, and that really helped. And we felt really comfortable with each other. Norris and I, Norris Robinson, she's a science teacher. She's still there, and we're still leading this eighth grade team of a lot of strong people that are enthused about working in front of kids and working together and collaborating. So
Yeah, no, it's cool, and I agree. Like when we got there, and actually, I remember the principal saying something like, you all have come here for a reason, but you also left the schools that you were at for a reason as well. And I feel like that was probably part of what helped us connect as a team was that we had at least that in common, that we were there kind of for similar reasons. And yeah, it worked out pretty well. And speaking of which, I think that one of the things that we started to do around that time also was kind of wrap our heads around using more technology. Like I would say that you were probably the first teacher that I knew who was really using some of the Google apps, especially Google Docs,
mm,
to really get in there and connect and communicate with their students, but like drive or not. I don't want to say drive. They were driving their own learning. You were supporting their
mm,
learning kind of from the side, but using technology. And I always thought that was really cool. And that was one of the topics that I know you said you'd like to touch on here. Obviously, that's really important in whatever school looks like for our listeners and for us right now. So yeah, I just talk about the technology a little bit.
yeah. I taught in IS 162 in District 7 for 10 years, and it was a roughneck school in a rough area across from St. Mary's Park. And I remember, you know, besides acting things out and storytelling and creating good discussion, there was a lot of notes and things. And I would write out in chart paper these huge pages of notes. And, the kids sometimes would dread, oh, wow, that's a lot of notes. And it's like, get through this. And then we get to the good stuff. And I remember it was 2008, and a student came in and handed me a disc. And they said, Mister, can you do this for my presentation? And I said, what is this? And they're like, it's a PowerPoint. And I was like, what is that? And, I figured it out pretty quickly. I was like, wow, this is great. And the charts were gone after that, never needed that anymore. And that really opened my eyes to using technology. It was just a faster, easier way the kids could connect with it. And then when I came over to VNA in 2012, we had credit to our school, we had a lot of access to good technology right away. The kids were pretty savvy right away, and even when they weren't, the great one of the great things about kids is they're willing to learn, they're willing to make mistakes. Whereas adults, even now that have been in the working with it for a long time, are reluctant to mess up and try those things. So yeah, I went from just basic PowerPoint to a smart board to using these different apps, and I've been using the Google Classroom for several years, and now it's kind of that's the norm. But again, I feel a little bit ahead of the curve. Kind of
Yeah. That was around
yeah,
the time that I started using Google Classroom too. That's about when it first came out,
yeah.
and I was really excited about using it. It was also around the time that I remember I created a class website for
Mm,
my students, which helped.
I know.
It helped communicate with families, and also I was able to link their grades to it,
Yeah.
which was also amazing when a parent would come in for a conference, or I'd call home or something, and they were like, what kind of homework is my kid getting, or what kind of grades?
Yeah.
And it's like, hey, just check the website, and
Yeah.
it was really cool to be able to do that. Now with Google Classroom and things like that, it's even easier. But that's always
Yeah.
been a big part of what I've been doing. I know.
Yeah. And the kids enjoy using it, again, during this time, especially like I know I'm in the minority, but I have found this actually easier right now than it was, being in a classroom as far as the logistics and not having to deal with paper anymore. And, the works, I don't have to worry about, this is torn out of the notebook and I got spaghetti sauce on it, it's a little cleaner in that way, and, generally speaking, I run a tight ship. I don't really have much disruption in my classrooms anyway, but there's even less so now. The kids really can't, you know, instigate each other the same way if they did want to,
And
So
I just want to throw that little caveat out there that you are still full remote. And when you say it's been a little easier, I think it would be easier if everyone was one or the other. My school's in a hybrid model right now, and it's tough just having to teach students, a handful of students in front of you, and then the rest of the classes at home is definitely different. And I don't know.
we're gonna go we're gonna go hybrid September 29th. We were supposed to go this week. And the way we were kind of alleviate that problem is I'm driving into the Bronx every day, and I have the 10 or 12 kids in a class in front of me, and then I would just live stream what I'm doing like we normally did when we were full remote. And again, the technology coming into it, I recently got a swivel, and so it'll track me as I'm moving around. I tend to move a lot, and
And I love Swivel. I also love I love their other product, Go Synth or Synth. And if they're listening and you want to sponsor the show, hey, Kurt's
I'll,
using it and he's loving it and I'm loving it. So
I'll wear a little swivel shirt.
there you go, Swivel all the way, baby.
I actually don't know about the one you just mentioned. Maybe we could talk about that later.
Yeah, Synth is really cool. It's by the company that does Swivel, and it's a podcasting app for teachers, students, podcasters. It's really cool.
Wow.
Here's also what I really wanted to get to, and I think we've touched on this anyway, but you put it in the form when we signed up here to connect for this interview. And I love this because it's so much of what I'm about and what I talk about on the show, which is basically how to stay active and committed to teaching over time. You mentioned you're getting on to about
Yeah.
your 27 years in education. I'm about 15 years, and no doubt things change a lot. Like literally, the first line of my dissertation said basically the same thing, which was, the only constant in education is that everything changes so often.
Hmm.
We have to adapt, and you've done it for a lot longer than I have, but what are some of the changes you've seen, and I guess how have you had to adapt over the years to those changes?
Yeah. Well, when I came in '94, February '94, I was a sub for several months first, and it was kind of the Wild West in a lot of ways. I did not have an education degree. I wasn't working towards one either, but District 7 was a rough place, and they needed whoever they could get, basically. And because I had coached football, like I mentioned earlier, that was my foot into the door. But those first several years, there was kind of, there was a lack of connection between administration and assisting their newer teachers, but as time went on, I definitely saw that improve. Um, Part of the reason I am still vibrant about this is that first year before I taught, I had this terrible job downtown, and I worked for $6 an hour, and I had to commute really far just to get there, and I hated it. And so when I got a job subbing, first the money was better, but the idea of being around kids, it's like, what's the worst thing can happen? Some kid's gonna give an attitude. It's like I worked a much worse job than this, so I kind of was appreciative of that. The first full class I had 41 kids in one class, and which is obviously very illegal, but
Yeah,
it's
that's
what
crazy.
happens. And I had 41 kids for a month, and but I figured it out. And then a month later, they said, "All right, we'll cut you down to 21." And all the kids wanted to be in my class, so I felt like vindicated by the kids. And I never stopped feeling that way. Like if the kids are good with this, then I must be on the right track, And those, it's funny, a lot of those kids then, they're, obviously very grown adults now with their own children and things, and I'm friends with them, you know. So part of what is, like I mentioned earlier when we were talking, it's always been about the kids to me, and kind of like, are they getting what I'm doing? Do they understand the value of this? Do they appreciate the effort of this without me having to tell them? Nobody wants to say, "Hey, I'm working really hard here," and that's the worst thing to do. But they have to feel that without seeing it. There was this one teacher I worked with many years ago, Miss Arroyo, and she seemed effortless to me, but the kids loved her, and it was like, I want to be like that. I see how much she's doing, but she's never sweating. I have a naturally grumpy face a lot of the time, and but I'm generally in a good mood 99% of the time. Once I realized, um, it's okay if I get mad at the kids. It's okay if they get mad at me, as long as we're going through this thing together and we respect each other. That's been the driving force more than anything else, more than even any of my colleagues or things. I hate to say it, but it's really been about the kids for me all these years.
Yeah, I feel similarly in terms of teaching styles. Like when I had my own classroom, I wanted it to be have this laid back feel to it, but at the same time still maintain high standards and set high expectations that students know. Like, listen, I'm gonna expect a lot out of you, and if I don't get it, sure, I'm gonna ride you a little bit, but at the same time, like they knew we were just gonna be cool with it, and I don't know. That's a lot of what drove me also in terms of the style is just like I don't want to be all in a kid's face about it, but look, at the end of the day, we got to get stuff done, but
Mm-hmm.
let's be cool about it, and
Yeah, yeah,
that's really helped.
yeah, and it's that mutual respect that you want to build right away, and it's also one of those things where, you know, one of the more fashionable things I think sometimes as teachers will come in the first day, especially newer teachers, and like, let's work on a set of rules together. And it's like, I understand where you're coming from, but at the end of the day, this isn't, a republic. It's more of an oligarchy. I'm a little bit more in charge here, and it's sort of like, if we're on the same page, this is going to be great. I trust me, but if you want to zig when I'm asking you to zag, we'll have a conversation about it. It's okay. Don't be confrontational, you know. It's like Patrick Swayze once said in Roadhouse, "Be nice until it's time to not be nice," and that served me really well. I don't have to get upset with kids. There's a mutual respect. If anything, they start self-policing because they like what's going on here. So if a kid acts foolish, the other kids are like, "What are you doing? Why? What's the game?" And they correct. And
Yeah, I
you
always
know,
kind of felt like the true test in terms of really finally saying, yes, I have a good rapport with this class or this student was the ability for me as a teacher to use disappointment as a classroom management strategy.
yeah,
Like I knew that if I got to a place where literally I could give like this expression on my face of like,
yeah,
really, like again I have to say this again or I have to call you out again,
yeah,
then I knew we had it, like I didn't have to, like we said before, I didn't have to get in anyone's face, I didn't have to really put the hammer down. It was kind of like, man,
yeah,
you messed up.
yeah, yeah. And I think sometimes, teachers and to an extent, parents too, sometimes we're afraid to have somebody to get upset with someone because then they're gonna be mad at me. It's like they'll be okay if there's a reason and we can speak later. But I have found, the first couple weeks of school, it's about, a lot of teachers, old school teachers would say, "Oh, never let them see you smile the first X number of weeks or months," and I'm totally not about that at all. But it's sort of like, I'll do my little spiel. I'm like, "You feeling good? You like this? Everything's cool?" I'm like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Then this is real simple. The rules are real simple. Be cool, and then this will keep being cool." And that's gotten me so many more dividends than, playing the tough guy or, threatening or, that negative reinforcement that oftentimes feels so natural and it oftentimes is even justified, but we don't, it really doesn't give you what you want, you know
Yeah.
and building those connections really does. And that kid believing that I'm upset not because you cross some line or some arbitrary rule, but because we're trying to build something here and you slow down our building, that resonates more.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I had a feeling we'd come back around to kind of that student engagement and relationship building piece too, because I said it at the beginning. I think that you've been one of the teachers that I've worked with throughout my career that's done it the best, and in an effortless kind of way, and maybe that came over time and lots of practice in terms of just being in education for a while.
Yeah.
What would you like if I had to? I did this recently in another episode too. I don't know, it's kind of weird, but like if we had a Venn diagram, right? One side is 1994 when you started, and one side is 2020, and in the middle there might be some similarities. Probably not. I don't know. Like, what would you say are the big differences between when you started and now?
Um, at heart, I'm a big teddy bear. I'm a bigger dude, but like, I have a very sentimental side, and it's very genuine. And I think that
Hopefully not
stayed.
on the football field. No, I'm just kidding.
You know what? There too. I'm. Joe Torre once said, you have to try and be intense without being tense, and I've tried to do that in front of students. To use my face, to use. Yeah, I got this grumpy face. I'm going to use it. Like you had mentioned, you see a student disappointed, you give that look of disappointment. I've tried to do that. So that's something that's there. The storytelling elements, the empathy for what a student's dealing with, whether it's in their personal life or academically or just socially. Um, that's a constant. I think that's still there, and the idea of trying to make it fun. I want to find a way to make this fun. Teaching the Reconstruction era in U.S. history is not intrinsically fun. You have to find ways to make it connect. And whether it was 1994 or now, I'm that's something I'm trying to do. So that's another element of similarity between those times and now.
I think because we went in so many different directions in this conversation, and I don't mind at all. I think it's been a great conversation, and obviously an awesome chance for us to catch up, but where we've lost touch a little bit throughout the years, but still stayed connected. What you just said, I want you to kind of wrap up with that statement, which is showing empathy for students and even their families as well, because I think all of this conversation has been the umbrella under that little piece that you just shared, and it took us 26 and a half minutes to get there, but I think that was so
I'm
perfect.
sorry.
No, it's awesome. I'm just proud that I was able to take that out, because I felt like that nugget right there was, I want to do justice to it.
Yeah, it's just, sometimes we forget when we were younger, and we just expect this kid to perform, but you don't remember when you were younger too. Maybe you had a hard time at home, or things weren't going that way, or you liked the girl and she just did not like you, or, those countless little mini dramas that you think, and sometimes not mini dramas, sometimes a legitimate real life crises that we take for granted as teachers, and to me, it's like, no, these kids are more than their grades. They're more than, their place in this classroom setting, and they're people. And I want them to care about what we're doing here. And for me to want them to care, I got to care. They've never been my students or they're my kids, and that's where the empathy comes in. And that's where and I'm vindicated by them, because part of the reason I stay on social media is to hear back from them, and they say things very specific about my class. Not just like, "Hey, you was the bomb, son." It's not just that. It's very, very vivid memories and very much appreciated words from them, and that's what keeps me going. I hope I'm going to turn 50 in January. I hope I have some at least 10 years in me. I still feel young. I'm pretty healthy. My family's really supportive, so as long as I can keep creating engaging lessons and showing this care for my students and them reciprocating by showing it back to me, I don't feel old at all.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'll turn 40 in February, so we're our birthdays are around the same time,
Yeah.
but we're separated by a little bit there. And but I feel the same way. I mean, I'm definitely driven to do what I do all the time, and it's a little bit different for me now. I feed more off of the reciprocation I get with the teachers that I'm supporting in a
Mm.
leadership role or an admin role, but it's the same kind of feeling, right? No
Yeah.
matter whether it's from students or teachers, and you got to hold on to those wins, especially when you're having some quote unquote losses or bumps
Mm.
along the road. It's obvious that throughout a almost 27-year career, you've had bumps on the along the way, but again, that piece that,
Well, it's not that obvious, Dan.
well, not obvious, but like,
I
look,
know you
anyone who's been around in
mean.
any field for 27 years, like, there's got
Yeah.
to be some highs and lows, and
Yeah.
um, again, that empathy piece that you said, I think is huge. But also, just going back to what you said before, like the kids are that fuel to your fire, and you said it again right now, so I know it's genuine. And obviously, having worked with you, very genuine. And again, man, thanks for what you do for your kids, and thanks for what you did for me, even in our time together. I look back on experiences like that a lot, and even though it was a brief amount of time that I was there, it was awesome. And
Yeah.
I've been looking forward to having you on the show for a while, so I'm really glad that we could connect like this.
Yeah, I thank you. I really appreciate the efforts that you make with these podcasts and in working with teachers now in Connecticut. But even when you were with us, it was sort of like you were this um, voice of reason. Like sometimes I could be all over the place, and passion sometimes can overtake logic and that straight line. And you were very much that straight line that was really effective for us as a team. It hurt us for a moment when you left. I totally understood it, and I'm glad you've done well since. It took us a minute to recover. I am happy to say that I learned a lot from you about finding that focus, and that's helped me in the years since. So thank you.
Well, I know you're not a big Twitter guy, but you are out there on socials, and if anyone does want to connect to you, what's the best way to reach you?
Well, my YouTube channel, that's something I'm really trying to push. That's Mr. Bascom's class. Very simple. On Instagram, I'm Social Studies Bascom, and on Facebook, I'm just me. I'm Kurt Bascom. I think I have a Twitter handle. I don't even know what it is. I go in there time to time, really, just to kind of. I have some friends that are really involved in activism and things, and I try to follow them that way a little bit. And of course, to follow my beloved Cowboys, I have to go there and you know vent when something goes wrong or celebrate when something goes right for them. So